everyone's doing great. My name is Noah. I'm a third-year computer science student at MUN, which pretty much is as nerdy as that sounds. I was born, raised, and quarantined in the wonderful town of Grand Falls, Windsor. So Pastor Steve and Rebecca, they asked me to do this Crushing COVID segment, kind of just highlighting the things that I've been doing to keep myself busy during this time. So there's a couple things that I've been doing. The main one I would say would be just to try to get myself to exercise every day, just to make sure that I'm feeling active, feeling good about myself. The way I like to do that is I love going for hikes and going for runs. I usually go around the trails here, but sometimes I go out, like last week I went to Twillingate just to do a nice trail there. I just really enjoyed being in nature. So I'm also a big fan of movies and TV, so I've been watching a lot of that. Even some with my family. We watched all the Harry Potter series, we watched the Lord of the Rings movies. We are finishing up the show Community now. It's my second time watching it, and I just love it, and they're loving it too. So that's pretty cool. Cool. Other than that, I haven't been doing too much. Scheduled some game nights with friends where we played Codenames online. Been trying to pick up a bit of piano, but that's not going well. Been trying to read, but I've been distracted by TVs and movies, so that's not going super great. And I've been doing some diamond painting, but I don't super have the patience for that either. So all in all, I've been watching a lot of TVs and movies and going for a lot of hikes. That's pretty much what I've been up to. Well, anyways, I miss you guys. I can't wait for everything to be back to normal, for us to be in the breezeway and seeing each other again. I really miss the company and the community I feel when I'm there. All right, love you guys. See ya.
Hey everybody, it's Emily here with you again to lead worship, and I'm joined by Tanisha tonight. I'm so excited. I've missed her so much, so I'm thrilled to be able to do this with her tonight. Make sure you get comfortable, whether you're sitting or standing. Just make sure you're comfortable enough to be able to join us in worship tonight. So yeah, we're gonna get started with a couple of very familiar songs to you guys. We do it quite often at Mosaic. So the first one is God, I Look to You. So. so grateful to you for being able to do that for our church. I pray that you would just be with the message tonight, and that whatever is being said will just minister into someone's life. I pray that you would be with us as we continue to go our separate ways this week, and that you would protect us and help us to grow closer to you, Lord. In Jesus' name, amen.
Thank you so much, Emily and Tanisha, for leading us in that time of worship together. So appreciate you guys taking the time this week to record that and just giving us that moment of worshiping together tonight. I want to welcome you to Mosaic at Home. If this is your first time joining us for our stream, we're so happy to have you. We would love to get to know you more, maybe talk a little bit more about what Mosaic is and what we value. And so if you would like to know more about us and give us the amazing opportunity of getting to know you more, please reach out to us either through Facebook or Instagram. You can email us as well at mosaiccampuschurch@gmail.com, and we can begin that conversation with you. My name is Steve Grimes, and I get the awesome opportunity of being the pastor at Mosaic, and we just have a few announcements for you as we continue on in our stream tonight. Some things that we have weekly and things that we want you to be a part of for this week as well. And so the first thing is something we've been doing for a few months now is some kind of Wednesday night social gathering together. And so we've had Instagram live takeovers. Hannah and Courtney did one of those last week, and it was awesome and hilarious. As well, we've done games nights. We've done Instagram live worship nights, and one of the things that we've done as well is a Netflix watch party, and that's what's coming up on this Wednesday night coming at 7:30 p.m. And so if you're a movie lover especially, you need to be a part of this. This is just an awesome time to enjoy a good movie. There's a chat option there where you can hang out and chat with some friends. And of course, get your favorite movie snacks together and just have a good night together. And so if you want to be a part of that, it's really easy in how you join. You just go to the link bit.ly/MCC Netflix party. And around 7:15 on Wednesday night, we'll send you all the info that you need so that you can join that Netflix watch party. And so please join us in that. It's always an awesome time. As well, what we've been doing for a number of weeks now on Thursday nights is hosting a Mosaic study group. And so for those who are doing courses maybe and you got some work to do, some studying to do, or maybe for the few that are still working at home, and you need to get some things done, this is just a way to have some people around you as you do work and hold you accountable to make sure you actually get some work done. And so if you want to be a part of that, it's a great time to connect as well. All you have to do is go to bit.ly/MCC study group, and we'll make sure that we send you the link so that you can join that on Thursday night. And as well, we are super excited again to offer our Mosaic After Party Zoom chats. These have been some amazing conversations. Last week was a great conversation again after our stream. And tonight especially, we want to offer this as to continue the conversation that we're going to have tonight. And so this is just a chance for you to process the content with other friends in a group, ask some more questions about what you heard, and maybe you have a say about what you heard as well. And so if you want to be a part of that, all you do is go to bit.ly/MCC afterparty. We'll send you the Zoom link as soon as the stream is done. We'll hop on there and have a conversation together. So make sure you join in and be a part of that, especially tonight, because what we have coming up next is such an amazing talk, a part of our series called What a Time to Be Alive. And this week I sat down with my friends over Zoom, three of my friends, Adam, Chris, and Kareem, and had just a really intense but life-giving and enriching and very educational conversation on racism and the injustice that's been happening in our world and what we can do as individuals and the church in being advocates in this time. And so this conversation is heavy. There's a lot to it. We've actually recorded so much. There's so much good content. We've made it a 2-part series. And so we're going to have a conversation this week with them. And as well, we're going to have one next Sunday. But we really want you to take this in. And as you'll see in this stream, in this conversation, there's a huge importance in talking about this, having a conversation, asking questions, and listening with the intent of learning. And so that's what we hope that you take in tonight as you take in this conversation that I had with my 3 friends. So take in this conversation, and then please join us for our after party Zoom chat after, and we'll come back after the conversation and close out our stream. Thank you, gentlemen, for being a part of this. The 3 of you were almost like my saviors when I entered Toronto. just a scared little Newfoundland boy who for some reason took over a youth group in Scarborough. In case like everybody watching doesn't know you guys, we have Chris Chase, who many would know. Chris has actually spoken at Mosaic before. We've had him on the stream already this summer. We have Adam Hoskins, who was a part of our worship stream that we did a few weeks ago as well. And then we have Kareem, who is such a good friend, a good buddy, who is so full of wisdom, and that I'm really thankful for. So we're having this conversation, and I'm so honored to have the three of you guys here. You're both wise in so many ways, and so to have a moment where the students at Mosaic can kind of get your wisdom in on this conversation on race and the injustice in our world and some of the events that have been happening in recent weeks. I'm really excited for them to take in this and to kind of listen, to learn from you guys. And so maybe right off the top, I'm wondering if one of you guys, or maybe all three of you kind of together, can you give a bit of a recap of what's kind of been unfolding and happening in the recent weeks?
It was we are 3 Mondays since the murder of George Floyd that took place at the hands of a Minneapolis police officer, with 3 police officers aiding and abetting in that murder. At first, what would normally be something where you would say, well, we need to see all the evidence. We have, in real time, really quickly been able to have full, almost 360-degree angle of exactly what happened. We saw that he was being detained for paying with a counterfeit bill, something that in most cases would not warrant the calling of police and an arrest. But we saw George Floyd be arrested for that. We saw him be detained on the ground, and then we watched for 8 minutes and 43 seconds his life leave his body. Even in describing it, it is very troubling to even talk about out loud in terms of what we all watched and what we've all we all witnessed.
This is kind of the straw that has broken the camel's back. To be quite frank and honest, this is just another black life that has been taken at the hands of possible racism, confirmed police brutality.
And the reality is there is a problem, and we need people to see the problem. So everything that's taking place right now is to bring awareness to the issues that have been taking place. And if you didn't believe that it existed, you now know.
I think a lot of Newfoundlanders could start to wrap their head around the thought that, racism doesn't exist in our province. And for anybody who's watching, and for the students at Mosaic, I want you to know that racism is a part of our province. It's happening. And so we need to wake up and realize this is and have these conversations. And so that's part of the purpose of this tonight. And so for us to listen and take this in. And so in a YouTube channel that you guys are all part of, and I want you guys to plug this as much as you possibly can.
House of Commons Show, please
yes.
subscribe to it on YouTube, like and subscribe to the channel, leave comments, please, or you can subscribe to it on Spotify or Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts. Please make sure to leave a 5-star review.
Wow.
Excellent.
I got to memorize Adam. Adam's the captain of our show, and I make sure I got it memorized. I always want to impress him by having it memorized all the time.
So, this show is one of the best things on social media platforms right now. And, I know I'm biased because I'm friends with you guys, but it truly is so educational on conversations like this, but also conversations on whether certain worship songs are worship songs. I see you, Chris Chase.
We're not going to touch that today.
Yeah.
No, that's
plausible deniability. I know what you're talking about. I'm just
But and other things as well. And so people need to subscribe and take this in. But in one of your episodes, you talked about the talk, and I'm wondering if you guys can get into that a little bit for us tonight.
Yeah, I'll start to the talk. So the talk that we're referencing is for every, specifically young black males, but also to young black females. When we are going into preteen, teen years in terms of our lives, what ends up happening is we will get a talk from our parents or a parent specifically relating to if we ever get pulled over or we're in a situation where there's any type of authorities that may be able to to use the strength in terms of their authority that they have on us, that there's certain ways that we need to conduct ourselves. So let's say I get pulled over. If I get pulled over, I got to make sure that I can see that the officer can see both my hands. And so I got to place my hands on the wheel. I can't make any big movements towards the cop because if I was to make any type of movement that may seem inappropriate, they may, out of fear, do something where they may take out their gun and shoot, because that's happened to our community in the past. Or when we're speaking to them, we got to speak with in a way where we're very respectful, and it's just short, quick answers. Yes, officer. Sure, officer. Explain everything that you're doing. All right, officer, I'm taking my hands off the wheel. I'm now going to my glove department to grab my driver's license and registration. I am now giving you my driver's license and registration. You can now see it. Here you go, officer. Like, it's a line by line. They go into details. Why? Because any wrong movement could lead to something that we just don't want to face as individuals. Yeah. And so this is, if you speak to any person of color, for the majority of those would say that when they were a kid, especially before if they started driving, this was a conversation that they got from either a parent or uncle or auntie, somebody within their family. Why? Because we got to make sure that we conduct ourselves in a way that we won't put ourselves in danger. When cops see us, they automatically approach with fear, essentially, is where it's founded in. And because there is that fear, out of fear, they may do something that may endanger us. And so this is the talk.
Yeah, it's the talk is predicated on the supposition that police are not our friends.
Yeah.
And so it's not just when we're pulled over, but it's really any time that police show up on the scene. And we've been trained and we've been mentored by our parents that even if you have done nothing wrong, there's a chance that a cop will try to find something wrong with you and what you're doing. And so you have to be very careful of your actions around police officers. So it could be something as small as you're at a house party and there's, somebody has a domestic disturbance call and the cops show up and stuff. That is a dangerous situation for a black young man or a black young woman. And you know what I mean? Like certain harmless things, a simple traffic stop, you hear numerous stories of those kinds of things. And the reality is that, maybe, for you guys listening, you might think, oh, well, whatever it is, I called the police. So obviously if I called the police, I'm going to be the one explaining X, Y, Z. It's not the same for us. And we're looked at immediately the talk given to us is that when a police officer assesses the situation, we are automatically seen as suspects until it is proven in their mind that we are not a danger to them and we are not incriminating in the scene. And so when we get around police, you could be the nicest kid ever, the softest kid, whatever it is, but the talk is under the supposition that police are not our friends. And when we call the police, even if we are the ones in distress, we also have to be careful because there is a high chance, a high probability that they will be looking at us to incriminate us.
Can I just add something? And I know I spoke already, but the other thing that is also included in the talk with that situation is that also understand that even when you're respectful and you do everything right based on the talk, they still may do certain things that are inappropriate. And in that moment, even then, do not try to fight back. Do not you gotta take it. And so, and the only reason why I bring that up is because I've been in those situations that even when you say all the right things, you do all the right things, you still get treated in an inappropriate way. And so the next part of the talk is, so even when that happens, you just gotta take it. You gotta recognize that's just the way it is. You've got to take it, because if you do anything after that, it's not going to be that the cop that's going to be put in trouble. You're going to be the one that's going to be put in trouble, and more. They might do more to you, and so that's another part of the talk.
Yeah, it's death or dignity.
Yep.
And you might lose either one.
Yeah.
Essentially,
Yeah.
Either you lose your dignity, like Reem said, and you let them say and do
Yeah.
whatever they want to you, or you fear death because you stood up for yourself. Um, the history of police for Black people, if you know the history from a Black person's perspective, is they were hired to run after and capture runaway slaves. In the DNA of police, there is something of a cops and robbers, and somehow, even if we're not doing anything wrong, we have there's always that sense of we're seen as the robbers. We're always seen as the bad guys. And even if like us, I'll be driving with my wife, and if I see I automatically, and she's like, "You don't need to slow down." I'm like, I'm not taking any chances. And she's like, "You do realize that's more suspect if you go from like 110 to 105 now." I'm like, "There's no winning," right? Because
Yeah.
in us, there is just sort of like this idea, and Adam said it so well. Like they're not our friends. They're not there. They protect some of us, not all of us, and we're not in that sum.
Yeah. We're not in the
We're
club.
not, we're not in the club, and so even like even if we meet a police officer that's really kind, we still will respond to them like we're in the principal's office, even though we're grown men. We have bought property, we've done this, we have cars, we have families, we've also, but suddenly
Education.
we're not, we're not just, we're smart individuals. We are like everybody else in the world. But when those things happen, it's almost like fight or flight, and flight takes over, because it's like I would just rather go home
Yeah.
and deal with the indignity of being treated unfairly. And I think I speak for all three of us. Like I think there's been moments where we've met really mean cops,
Yeah.
and moments where we've met really kind cops, but yet still in our minds it's kind of like, oh man, again. Like I remember, so I got to tell the story. Like so after, and this is gonna be such a sad thing to say. Like I can't remember which shooting of a Black man it was. That's how many Black shootings there's been in the last like 7 or 8 years. But I remember I was like, I feel the responsibility to take my kids to the police station so they can meet police officers, because I don't want my kids to be afraid of police like I have been raised to be afraid. I want to do the right thing. Okay. So we go to the closest police station, which is in Pickering at the time, because I lived in Ajax, Ontario, and we walk in there in the division, and it's like a day after the Dallas shootings. So they're very stressed out. Like, once you're in the uniform, you identify with everybody in a uniform. Like the uniform becomes the club, right? Like that's, they like Reem would say in one of our episodes, like the uniform is a gang sort of thing.
It's boys in blue.
Right. And so we get there, and I'm trying to explain to them, hey, like, I recognize it's been a tough week for you. I'm trying to bring my kids here so that they know, like, so they meet some nice police officers, and they know that, like, they don't have to be afraid. The police officer leans over, doesn't come behind the glass. Like, it's me, my kids are little. Like, there's nothing that they're going to do. And the police officer goes to my son and goes, well, if you don't do anything in trouble, we're not going to arrest you, and walks away. And I'm like, I'm actually here to put you over. I'm here to make your job easier. So my son is always like, oh, police officers are nice. I want to be but now it's kind of like, in my son's mind, he's like, okay, now I'm the enemy. That's what it's like for all of our kids.
Yeah.
That's what it was like for me. It was like for these guys. That's what it's like for all of us.
So do you guys remember the moment that like you had that talk with your parents and what you felt like?
Yeah, I remember. I remember my father talking to me about police officers, but I mostly remember my mom just continually ingraining in me, like, Adam, like, don't, like, be careful, be careful, be careful, be careful, be careful, and just it's little things. It almost seemed like every single time I would leave, my mom would go through her little checks and balances. She would pray over me and whatnot. And also just, just like, oh, like if you, don't speed, because if you get pulled over, they'll put you in jail. And, like all these kinds of things that, like, as a youth, it was half true for me, because I part of it, as an 18-year-old, you think you're the smartest person in the world, right?
Yeah.
But then there's also this looming history of, oh wait, but my boy actually got locked up because of XYZ, or this happened to this person that I knew, and you know what I mean? So So I just remember like, and even still like leaving the house, there's when I'm leaving my mom's or whatnot, there is this sense of impression of like, be accountable. It's not just like, all right, yeah, we'll see you later, XYZ, but it's like, hey, like, be accountable because like the world is not nice to you.
Yeah. Like I know I was probably more of a fair weather, like that's not gonna happen to me. Right, which is pretty well like my personality on most things. Like I'm gonna be fine, whatever. And I remember being a young adult, and I was late for church. I was supposed to be leading worship that day, and for whatever reason, I'm driving. I'm speeding. I was speeding, and I got pulled over. And I remember like absentmindedly forgetting, and I was so nervous about getting my pastor upset that I like stupidly. I should be dead. I got out of my car and I was like, "Officer, I didn't mean to." And I remember him grabbing his gun on the highway. There are cars passing by, and and I'm like this. I'm literally hands up, don't shoot. I'm so sorry. I'm a little kid who wanted to lead worship for Jesus, and his automatic reaction was, "I'm going to and not tase you, but I'm going to take you out." And I remember I think I was like 19 or so, and I had run-ins before, but that was the first time I was kind of like that could have been the end of my life, and that kind of switched over my mind from that moment on. Where I remember going to my parents, and my parents being like, "You see," and that's what's like being a black man in Canada. You see, and just like any West Indian parent, there's no compassion. It's
Yeah.
just blame.
They're mad
There's
at
no sort of like, "Are you okay, son?"
Yeah.
It's like, you see,
Yeah,
what
that's
I
that's.
tell you?
Well, if you don't listen, you must feel. That's what that's.
they
You
should have
don't listen, you must feel. So like, me did tell you. Me did tell you.
We did tell you.
I remember coming home from a friend's house. This was in grade 8. I was in grade 8, and I came around a corner, and this unmarked police car pulled up behind my brother and I. We were on our bikes, and then this marked police car was coming down in front of us. So we were boxed into this little thing, and it swung out, and 2 officers got out of each car. All of them had their guns drawn. I'm a grade 8. My brother was grade 9, and they had their guns drawn, and they're like, "We know you have a gun. Put your hands up. We know you have a gun." And we just come home from our friends, like we'd been playing Nintendo. You know what I mean? And we're sitting there, and I was literally looking at my brother like, "This is it. This is it, man. Like, this is the moment that our parents have warned us about, that we've literally done nothing. And we're 2 kids." And they had so here's what they said, right? And it didn't click to me until later. They said that somebody called and said that they had been shooting a pellet gun at a park. 4 officers have their guns drawn, have lethal munition at 2 kids who could possibly have a pellet gun.
Pellet gun.
Wow.
Yeah, and it sucks that we all have these stories. 'Cause I could speak to a couple of mine. Sorry, one where I literally was beat. I've been one that's been beat up by cops, and to the point where when my mom saw me, she didn't even recognize who it was. My face was all beat up. And then another time where I got pulled over. I was driving one way, cop was coming the next way. We glanced eyes. I looked in the rear view. He made a U-turn. I got pulled over. Kind of similar to Adam. I guess I fit the description of some sort of illegal activity that took place. At the end of it, I think what was said was there was somebody who had attempted murder or did some sort of murder, and he was out, and I fit the description of this individual. So somehow in the midst of just passing and seeing me, lock eyes, my car, that cop car, he pulled me over, took me out. I literally got stripped down to my boxers in the middle. This is with me just, yes, officer, okay, officer. If you mind if I don't ask, what's the reason behind all of this? I'm being told, just do as you're told, being very assertive with me. And at the end, I got pulled over within 2 to 4 minutes tops. There was 4 other cruisers that were all around me. I'm on this main street. I was actually going to church for a youth service. I ended up having to be late because of this whole thing that took place. And at the end of it, there was no apology, nothing. I literally got embarrassed. But what happened was another officer finally said, "Oh no, it's not him," and all it was, "Oh, okay, you can go." And so, I mean, it sucks because a lot of us fit the description. We all look the same in their eyes. So,
even though none of us look the same,
even though none of us look the same,
right? And that's
me and Adam worked together, and I can't tell you how many times I got called Adam when I worked at the same church. And me and Adam
and I became friends because we were at a wedding, and somebody thought I was Adam, and Adam was me. Do you remember that, Hosky? Like that's where we actually that's where we actually met and became friends. It's because somebody thought that I was you, and somebody thought you were me. And so there's those moments where it's comical, but then those moments where it's dangerous because on the wrong day, you could be somebody because of something, and you're trying to explain yourself to a police officer. I'm not that person, and all they can see is threat. They're not thinking de-escalation. They're not thinking you need to ask the questions. And the reality is, by my rights, I cannot answer you until you tell me why you're my rights are.
By our rights, but we don't have those same rights.
And that's what I mean. By our rights, that's just in quotations. By our rights, we should be able to say, you actually can't do that. You can't search my car. You can't search me. You can't do that stuff. You can't detain me. I want to see a lawyer. We can do all those things, but they know that we can't fight, and we know if we fight, we die. So it comes back down to the dignity or death. And the reality is this, man. So I was doing this research on this morning. I'm trying to work on a sort of a research paper pamphlet for people, because a lot of this stuff has brought up the idea of we're talking Black Lives Matter and police reform, and on one side defund the police, on the other side demilitarize, blah blah blah, all sorts of stuff. And a lot of people who think there's not a problem will say, well, we need to fix black on black crime first before we start talking about reforming the police. But if they'll have different stats and things like that. But the reality is, it's probably 1 in 1,000 of a black person that you're going to meet who actually commits crimes, actual dangerous crimes. 1 in 1,000. If you were actually, if I actually have to stop and think, how many black people do I know? Black men do I know? Legitimately in my life who've committed, there's not many of them. And I've been around a lot of black people. And the majority of them don't. The majority of them are like us, just hustling, trying to stay alive, trying to take care of their families, trying to do all this sort of stuff. But what ends up happening is we all kind of get roped into this thing. We all get roped into this bad narrative that both, to use the terms, liberal and conservative media portray about us, and we all end up fitting this description, and that is used to scare cops and police officers and define how they're trained and define what they read and define how they operate. And we don't get a chance to be able to say, Kareem doesn't get a chance to say, I'm Kareem. I'm a father of 3. I'm a pastor in a church. I've been a community organizer and a community leader for this amount of years. I'm an educator. He doesn't get a chance to say that. To them, he's not a person. Dignity or death, man. Dignity or death.
I've been seeing a lot of white people posting, I'm happy about these protests, but not all cops are bad. I'm happy about these protests, but there shouldn't be damage done. And immediately for me, there was this not awkward, but it was really troubling. And I thought these posts are very insensitive, especially now after hearing your guys' individual stories of the encounters that you've had. I was wondering what your guys' thoughts were on that.
I get it. I get, if you're not used to this life, you're looking at it from a fishbowl perspective. So while I don't think a person would fully get what is happening and why people are upset, I get it. I get it. If you're not used to it, you're going to have an opinion based on what you're not used to. So someone's like, well, there are. Do you think it's do you think that black people don't know that there are some good cops out there? Do you think that black people don't know that? We are fully aware. There's some of us who are black people who wear the badge. I was on a Zoom call with a pastor a former pastor who's now a police officer now, who's a black man, and who has all these things going through his mind at the exact same time when he's doing his entire job, knowing that on one hand, one set of people are going to call him an Uncle Tom, and on the other hand, people are going to say that he's not going in enough on the troublesome youth of Toronto. Right, like we know that there are good police officers. We know that. We actually historically, and if you do the research, we actually speak more to our own community and how our own community needs to be doing better than we do about police brutality.
Yep.
We actually speak more, and people don't know this. We actually speak more to our youth about how they need to rise above things within themselves and among
100%.
each other than we do about talking about police brutality. We talk about police brutality when we are brutalized.
Yeah.
We talk about it when things like this happen. But we spend more time. Our barbershops, man. If you ever go to a black barbershop and just be a fly in the wall, we talk about these things all the time. Man, why are you talking like that? Why are you cursing? Why you do that? You know you have to be twice as good to go just as far. We are constantly speaking into our people. But if you're not a part of the conversation, you don't know, and then you will only speak on what you see on a post or what you see in an article or what you see on a film.
Yeah.
Do I agree with them when they say this XYZ? No, but I understand where they're coming from because they don't know, Steve.
Yeah.
They don't know. When you don't know any better, you speak ignorantly about anything. For example, Reem does not know as much about basketball as he says he does. I know
my
more
gosh,
than
you're
he does.
wilding right
my
now.
top 20 list was better than him.
Oh my gosh.
Stop. I have the microphone. His knowledge on basketball is limited because of
Oh my
ignorance.
gosh,
And
Shaish.
the
Why are you
same
going to make yourself look so not wise right now?
Easily. Look at this.
We're
Look at
doing
this
this
lineup
talk.
here.
We're trying to come from a
lineup that I
place
did
of
myself.
wisdom. Trying to come from a place of wisdom, and you're totally wrecking all credibility right now. Because now, if they look at your list compared to mine, they're gonna be like, "How could this guy say that his list was better than his?" Oh man, I can't listen to. He said, I thought he said a lot of great points up until this point, but now after all of that, I can't even take this guy serious. It's all out the door. Everything he said was it's just nonsense. There can't be any credibility to it whatsoever.
I'm trying to make is this. We talk I will give credit to Reem's list. It actually is a good list. But the point I'm trying to make is this: when you don't know better, you say silly things. And there's a lot of people who spend more time speaking out on a subject as opposed to asking about the subject. They spend more time saying and sharing something as opposed to going to a group of people, not just one black person that they know, not just one conservative or liberal black voice that they found. They don't go and actually spend time with people who are actually on the ground living this life going like, what does this mean to you? So when they say like I understand that the looting and this, do I agree? No. Do I get it? Yes. When they say good cops, do I agree? At a point, do I understand why they're saying it completely? Yes. Reem was gonna say something.
Yeah, and we definitely do recognize that there are a lot of good cops. So here's on the flip side of it. I'm gonna speak to something that not Chris Chase. I'm not gonna quote this guy because he speaks. No, I'm kidding. No, Chris Rock, and it was a comedy bit, but there was a lot of truth to it. The statement he was saying was, yeah, a lot of people say there's only some a couple of bad apples, but there's certain professions where you can't afford to have a bad apple. And he's talking about, let's just say if we saw a pilot and we say there's some pilots that are bad apples, would that be okay? That every now and again planes are crashing into the sea. Like, is that okay? There's some professions where it shouldn't be okay to have bad apples, and I agree that possibly cops is one of those things. Yeah. Cops is one of those professions where there shouldn't be, or they shouldn't be afforded the opportunity to be able to just, be looked at as that bad apple or those few bad apples. Those few bad apples is what lends to innocent people losing their lives, or people losing their lives for such mediocre things. And so in relation to that, yeah, you're right. There may be just a few bad apples, if that is the case. And I actually think there's a lot of bad apples. There are a lot of good apples, but there's a lot of bad apples. If that's the case, we're saying that it's okay that if there's a few of these guys that are doing the things that they're doing to a certain people group. That's one point. to kind of further just nail that point, I actually think if if they were, and this is what I would love to see, is would be harder consequences for those bad apples. Like it should be, there should be the same fear that one would have to commit murder knowing the consequences of it. There should be some sort of real fear as a cop that if I do some sort of injustice as a bad apple, as a cop, because we have this high standard, that I know that, and one of our brothers from the house said this, that I'm gonna, one, be fired, two, be prosecuted and charged and spend life in jail, or be put in jail and be put in prison. A lot of these guys recognize that their unions are so strong that even if they get caught with something, that they'll be able to get out. Or there's a culture, because they are really a big gang, that they can all cover each other, and they could sweep this under the rug and take care of each other.
They can all resign at the same time. They can all walk at the same time.
Oh, like, and then
Right.
everything get worked out. Like that has to be eradicated. We can't just look at it and say, "Oh, it's a bad apple." And that's fine. Nobody's perfect. And you're right, nobody's perfect. But there's certain professions, there's certain situations where you shouldn't be afforded the ability to be able to do those type of things.
Justice for Breonna Taylor.
Yeah.
Say
Yeah.
the name.
I think what everybody, I laugh whenever I hear that saying of like a few bad apples, because that tells me that you, for one, maybe you don't do a lot of interaction with apples, and then so therefore you don't actually know the saying, and you don't know about this thing called ethylene, which is a ripening agent in fruits, which I don't expect you to know about, but ethylene essentially is when one apple goes bad, the reason why you have to isolate, alienate, and dispose of it is because it releases ethylene into the rest of the bunch. And so what were good apples very quickly turn sour and bad because of this ripening agent that the bad apple is now exponentially producing. And it works the same way with your culture, right? In terms of what Kareem and what Chris was saying in terms of these bad apples who are on the force. Sure, there might be, I don't presume that all four cops that were there were racist or were bad cops, but I know that 3 out of the 4 of them were contemplating and covering for their brother in blue while they watched him murder George Floyd. And so this is why we say, like, the fullness of that is just remind people it's like a few bad apples spoil a bunch. It's not just, oh, there's a few bad apples and that's just what it's going to be. No, it actually spoils the entirety of it. And so this is why, and then in terms of, protests and stuff, I think people have to understand that the movement that is going on right now for civil rights is a peaceful protest. And what you're seeing you're actually seeing police, you're seeing, I guess, anti-government organizations infiltrate these protests and try to incite violence and stuff. There are numerous videos that have been popping up of police officers who are trying to incite violence with people. There are also videos of undercover police officers who are rousing up crowds and all these kinds of things. And these are tactics, these are riot tactics that police forces employ so that they can
Justify.
so they can justify their use of force in a situation. The police are most efficient when they're using force because the public does not have the same amount of force and organization as a police. And so in order for a police officer to assert and control a situation, the only way in which they know how to do so is by use of force. The problem is that in the Constitution, it's the people's right to peacefully protest. And so they cannot use force until there's actually force used against them. It's called rules of engagement. And we see this on the battlefield. We see this now in the home front. So their rules of engagement are unless something violent happens, you are actually not allowed to engage with the people protesting. It is their right to protest. And so now you have you have police officers who are trying to rile up the crowds to get them to use force so that they can now use their riot tactics to push back crowds and ascertain control of the situation. So when I hear all these things in terms of like, riots and all these kinds of things, like there's a lot that's mixed in with it, and it's crazy because a lot of the noise, like social media, the access that we have to social media is also the same curse that buries a lot of the good stories that are actually happening of peaceful protests, and it's sad.
And so, like, I hear these so personal stories for each, like the three of you. The three of you has so much composure and strength.
Yeah. Well, there's a James Baldwin quote. I'm trying, like pretty well something to the effect of like to be. He uses the word Negro because that would have been his vernacular during that time. Is to be a Negro in America is to be in rage all of the time.
Mm.
You're always like just because we're calm, just because we're polite, it doesn't mean that we're not hurt and angry and bothered all the time.
Yeah.
It gets channeled into how we serve. It gets channeled into how Adam creates for music, how Reem organizes it and leads youth and gives them the kicks the knowledge to them so that they would avoid any of the pratfalls that society would put around them. It gets channeled in different places, but don't get it twisted. There's anger.
Yeah.
And I think that's the key. What you say is we channel. We've made an intentional decisions to channel the anger or rage or disappointments, the feelings that we have towards these injustices in a positive way. I think as a whole, for every individual that faces any type of injustice, and we're not just talking about racial injustices, injustices as a whole. In those moments, you have a choice to either channel this and use this for good, or for bad. And the way, and I think I could speak for all of us here, is we recognize that when you can't fight evil with evil. That's not going to go anywhere. And so, rather than try to fight evil with evil, we decide that we're going to channel it in some sort of different way for the good, in hopes that over time we could see change.
Yeah, and so like one of the ways that I've seen this channel was with you, Adam, in your own personal post that you made in your video. Like you came out and said, there's actually, all of us need to check ourselves here, and you made the comment that there's racism in all of us. So now I'm wondering if you can explain exactly what you meant by that. And
Well, I don't agree with the narrative that some people would have is to be oppressed is not to be oppressed is to not also take on the form of an oppressor. And I think that psychologists use the term nature versus nurture. And the thing is that we have to understand that racism is both nature and nurture. There's no versus here. It is both and. It's compounded by our experiences, by our outlook on the world, by the things that we see and we consume in the media. All of these things build our worldview and the way that we see other people around us. And so the reality is that we're hardwired, I believe, by sin nature to hate. We're hardwired to be angry. We're hardwired to look out for ourselves and to look out for our own at the cost of other people. And I think that that solutions outside of this, you really have to understand who you are to be able to see this within yourself. You really have to understand that you're not better than the next person in regards to just because you may have education or you may have certain opportunities and whatnot. That doesn't actually make you any better under the eyes of God and in the eyes of other people. Racism is something that it may not be expressed in a in a manner of dropping N-bombs or whatever it might be, whatever racial slurs you might have for other minorities or even different people. But it's just in the way that in which we approach people, and our nature is to approach people in a carnal manner. And I think that that's the thing, is to say that none of us, that some of us don't have a sense of racism in us, without it having recognized and eradicated, is to actually say that you don't have carnal nature, which is totally against the vernacular of the kingdom and the gospels, right? It's that we were born with a carnal sin nature, and that we are constantly being sanctified, and we're constantly being purged of this sin nature. And so we have to recognize that although it may pop out in the Confederate flag in some, and others it may pop out when you're getting cut off by a, I'm going to say it right here, by a Chinese driver. But we all have this inbred thing within us that wants to hate, that wants to do bad to other people, and we need the reconciliation, and we need the saving power of the gospel of Jesus in our lives to be able to eradicate these things.
Yeah, in terms of adding to that, we have our sinful nature and then we have our carnal nature or flesh nature. And what we have to understand that what plays into, we're talking about um, nature versus nurture, and it is both. I would agree with Adam. As it pertains to both, you have in those moments when something happens or a situation, if you face a situation, what we got to understand is in that moment there is that eternal internal battle of what your flesh is saying versus what Holy Spirit might be saying to you in that moment. And just like any situation that we face, we need to be intentional about wanting to lean towards not our own thoughts, our own feelings, but on Holy Spirit. And what we got to understand when we don't, because if we don't lean on the Holy Spirit, we're going to naturally lean to our flesh, and what plays into our flesh is culture, and culture is where all these different stereotypes come from. People might try to say that there's no stereotypes and that I see everybody the same and that I don't see any color. I actually get worried when I hear people say you don't see color, because you can't tell me you don't see color. You definitely see color. In fact, if you don't see color, that means you don't celebrate who I am as an individual, as somebody who's different, or
Yeah.
my culture as somebody who is different, and we are different. I'd rather you recognize that and allow that to shape how you are around me, so I don't feel like I have to change around you because you assume myself to be a certain way. And so because we talk about there is racism in all of us, naturally our natural beings want to go towards what culture is saying, what our flesh would not, our flesh would naturally want to go towards that. And everything in culture, people may try to say that it doesn't exist, but it exists. There's stereotypes, there's prejudice, there's different types of misunderstandings or ignorance that is at play within culture that will play into these types of feelings or thoughts that we have towards different people. You see it practically speaking. If if any of us can remember that first time, uh, let's say for instance me, I can think for myself. The first time I told my dad that I was dating a white girl, the reality is his first inclination, this is in all of us, his first inclination is going to be, oh wow, a white girl. I didn't see my son being with a white girl. That's just me being thing, and that's from
I
anybody.
got that
Like,
too. I got that too.
not naturally speaking, you're going to have feelings. Or let's say we slept over at a house of a friend who was a different color. I can't speak for sure, but I'm going to assume that
Wait,
in a
wait,
lot
Kareem,
of
you guys to
situ
go to sleep. You guys to go to sleepovers?
I
You
was
guys
allowed
to
to
go
go.
sleepovers?
I,
Wait, wait,
I was
wait.
allowed to go to
Wait,
sleepovers
wait.
later on
Yeah, I was gonna say.
in life,
I was
because
gonna
definitely
say,
wasn't
but
when I was,
jeez.
yeah, but when you were first allowed when you were first allowed to go to sleepover, and say you're going to a, somebody of different color, the different thoughts process that mom or dad may have, they may not say it aloud, but right away there's going to be that thought. And we may try to say, oh, I didn't have that thought, but you had that thought, and you got to realize that that's in all of us. We all have those thoughts, and
Yeah.
there's nothing, that initial thought, that's just something, that's because that's this what it is. That's what culture has ingrained in us. It's the next step, and that's where it's different for the next thought or the next action. That's where people have to be very careful, and that's kind of, again, it isn't all of us. We all have these things in us, and if we were to say that we don't, then we're just being ignorant.
Yeah.
Mm.
Before you
Yeah,
jump in, Chase, I just wanted to say that, I had said on the house a while ago that, I firmly believe, and I'll say it here again, but like the things that concern me about these movements, like Black Lives Matter and the civil rights things that are happening, while I'm thrilled that we're making progress in this way, um, what concerns me is the participation of the church and the effectiveness of them bringing about the kingdom of God. Because otherwise, what happens is that, let's say we follow this narrative right through, um, then eventually we actually become the oppressors. Black people become the oppressors, and then maybe white people become the oppressor. Someone else becomes oppressed or whatnot. And so I firmly believe that like the eradication of racism is not a civil rights thing. It is a kingdom thing.
Yeah.
While civil rights does well for changing aspects of society, to change a heart, it takes an act of God.
I the only thing I would add is there's understanding. One, first we understand the definition of racism as a word, as a concept.
Yeah.
Right. The idea of it being, the idea of a race finding itself to be superior than another race, and then being able to use powers therein to then keep that superiority in place. So in that regard, it's harder for a minority to be racist because I can have black pride,
Yeah.
but still a police officer can pull me over, and then that's the end of my life, right? So that's different, right?
Yeah.
Like there's a definition of systemic or systematic racism,
Yeah. Yeah.
and then there is the problem of prejudice that can lead me into hating my
Yeah.
brother,
Yeah.
right? Like I can't like there are systems in place that completely eliminate my progress.
Yeah.
And that's bluntly said. There are some like I have achieved a lot in my life, and I've been very blessed by that. Like there's certain things like I've been able to do a lot in my life. I'm really happy with that. But I also recognize that like there's certain things I just probably won't be able to do because of the limits of the system around me. I can achieve, but then there's what there is. There's also like 5 other people who look like me who are achieving the same spot, and we've been positioned to kind of like elbow each other out of that spot because there's only enough room for 1 or 2 of us. And then there is the racism inside of all of our hearts that would say that we hate our brother because. So that's me. So a perfect example is like after leaving that police station, like I told the story with Liam and Ellie. If I go into the car and I go, "You see that, Liam? That's why you never trust the white man." Well, what about? No, you never trust them ever. They're against you. You hate them forever. And every time we're talking about, and I'm feeding in this hate to him. The more I do that, and the more all this sort of stuff, and like it takes only the Holy Spirit can unravel that.
Yeah.
Only the Holy Spirit can unravel that. So I just felt like it was important, like in the midst of like nature versus nurture, to understand that there are definitions to this. So you might have somebody say like well, that person's racist against that person, that person's racist against that person. Well, define what you mean by racist. Are they being mean? Are they being prejudiced? Are they this? Or are you describing a system in place? Because if you're describing a system, it's really hard for me to be racist against you. But can I call you a name? A racist slur? Yes, I can do that. So it's important to kind of have those definitions in place, just so that because what people end up doing is they hear a soundbite, and then they build an entire theology or entire statement that for themselves off of a soundbite that remakes or Adam makes or I make or you make. They will entirely go, well, Chris Chase said this, and therefore now they have a whole charter of what racism is or what racism isn't.
I see Jesus.
We see that, like that's pretty well Facebook right now is a whole bunch of people using stats and figures to be able to describe what racism is and what racism isn't, to the in the face of people who've actually systemically been treated racially, or who have experienced racism in a really bad way. They will then say to them, well, I read this book by this person, and everything you're saying is a lie. And we would never do that to someone's testimony in the church.
Thank you so much, Adam, Chris, and Kareem, for having that conversation with me and allowing us to share it with our church as a whole. You guys are so vulnerable, so honest, but so wise in that conversation. And so I'm so thankful for you that we can have this moment as a church to learn, to listen, to be educated, and to give some really great practical advice and how we can be advocates in this time. And so for those who are watching, especially those a part of our Mosaic family, will you commit yourselves in joining us as a church in being advocates for seeking out the injustice of all kinds in our world and in the communities that were surrounding us, to be advocates for spreading love in every situation, to standing up against injustice that we see in situations, and really bringing the kingdom of God here on this earth. And so please join us in that. And one of the best ways that I know I learned through this conversation that I had with the guys was the best thing we can do is to keep talking, to keep having conversations, to keep learning about this. We may never fully get the vastness of this topic, this issue, the hurt and pain that comes as a result of it, but we can be advocates for change, for life change in the worlds that surround us. And so keep having conversations, keep asking questions, keep listening with the intent of learning, not with listening with the intent of responding, listening with the intent of learning. And so will you commit to that with us? One of the best ways that we can do that is right now with our after party Zoom chats. We're going to keep this conversation going, dig into the questions a little bit more, dig into what we heard a little bit more. So please join us on that. It's not too late. We'll send you the link and we'll start that as soon as I'm done speaking here. Again, there's a part 2 to this with some great conversation as well. So please join us next Sunday for Mosaic at Home, and we'll keep the conversation going with Chris, Adam, and Kareem. Have an awesome week. If you need anything, please feel free to reach out to us. We love you, and we're always here for you, Mosaic. Have a great week.